Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Lambert. I am your host of Target Justice v. Garland, a podcast about an extraordinary lawsuit. I missed the last episode. I regret it, but my friends, Richard and Anna, picked up the torch and carried it proudly. So you got an episode about a megaphone implant detection. And we'll be talking about it even more. There will be more Substack newsletters about it. So this topic is not going away. Please say hi to my co-pilot, Anna Toledo. Anna, good morning.
Hi, good morning, and hi everybody, and welcome back, Len. I'm so happy to have you back.
I appreciate all the good wishes and thank you very, very much for everybody who sent me their words of support, their thoughts and prayers. I really do appreciate it. So let's go to the topic of today's podcast. We learned about two bills introduced in two states, in Colorado and in New Hampshire. And those two bills are different, but they are also related. All right, let's get to it. The first bill we're gonna review today is called Protecting the Privacy of Neural Data and Expanding the Scope of the Colorado Privacy Act. So it's an expansion of already existing law in Colorado, Colorado Privacy Act. It passed the House committee on January 30th. So here's a bill summary. In 2021, the General Assembly enacted Senate Bill 21-190, which established the Colorado Privacy Act. The present bill expands the definition of sensitive data to include biological data, which is data that provides characterization of the biological, genetic, biochemical, or physiological properties, compositions, or activities of an individual's body or bodily functions. And then further, the biological data is defined to include neural data, which is information that concerns the activity of an individual central nervous system or peripheral nervous system, including the brain and spinal cord, and that can be processed by or with the assistance of a device. Any questions so far, Anna?
No, I think that the Colorado Privacy Act is probably enforceable against state operators. I'm not so sure. Like the federal one, the United States Privacy Act, it's enforceable against the state, not necessarily against private individuals. But let's move on and see.
The scope of the bill. It talks about newer technologies, including devices capable of recording, interpreting, or altering the response of an individual's central or peripheral nervous system to its internal or external environment. What I like about this part is that it talks about altering the response. So it's not just sucking up the data, it's also interfering with then further it defines the scope of the bill, and the scope includes newer technologies that are deployed in medical setting, and then newer technologies that are deployed as consumer products. And what this bill is concerned about, that if the newer technology is used in medical settings, then there are privacy tools, area of activity is typically regulated because they're medical tools, medical devices to produce health information, can be both invasive or non-invasive, wearable technology, but it's a medical device that is regulated. What they're warning us about is that when non-invasive newer technologies are used outside of medical settings, they're generally considered consumer products and operate without regulation or data protection standards. That's it. That's the scope. Is it really these are just two scenarios when newer data is being transferred.
Well, the thing is, the scope of the bill, but it doesn't, I mean, as I read it, it does, it's a Privacy Act bill. It doesn't provide penalties. I didn't see any. It doesn't provide teeth. That's what, because we know that there's people collecting information, and they clearly know there's people collecting information that are not for health purposes. They know it. But really, what can you do with it? What is this bill good for? I didn't see, only one practical, and I'll talk to you about it later. But I didn't see any practical implementation of it benefiting targeted individuals. That's my position. I don't see that how any of its provisions can in any way. But correct me if I'm wrong. I just didn't see it.
No, you're absolutely correct. This is the scope of the bill. They're concerned about consumer products that collect or interact with neurological data. And their concern is that it's not a medical field, but it collects medical information in the form of neurological data and interacts with it. And so that needs to be regulated. That's the scope. And we know that it does not even come close to the range of applications when neurological data is collected and manipulated. What about the criminal use? This is not a consumer product. You don't get a consumer product from a criminal organization. What if it's the government itself collects neurological data? Are we asking the government to follow certain rules? So,
Yeah.
so the scope to me is very unsatisfactory. It's very limited, and it's not what we target individuals are suffering from. We're not targeting from wearing an Apple Watch. This is just one of the method of collecting data. But what about neuro strike attacks? It
Well,
doesn't
I,
talk
I can tell
exactly.
you something that I do read between the lines, and probably the people that drafted this know that this is existing. And it's, the interfaces that pharmaceutical companies and implant manufacturer companies have done is that they do have interfaces that interact with these medical devices inside of us that are not necessarily DoD or US Space Force. We're talking here people that we just need to be connected to Wi-Fi to be transmitting to these companies that they have their own interface facilities where they are constantly receiving and interpreting private data of people that, like me, didn't even know that we were implanted. So maybe this is an area it intends to cover, but again, I don't see any teeth into this bill.
I agree, no teeth, and the scope is deeply unsatisfactory to me.
It's very general. It's it's
It's
it's like it doesn't want to really say, it doesn't want to, hit the nail in the head.
and that's probably because these people are not really concerned about that problem. They don't have, for example, the category of targeted individuals in mind when they drafted this bill. So
And
let's see.
you cannot lose perspective. Now that you go into behind the bill, you cannot lose perspective at this.
Right.
Number
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
Colorado is the capital of the targeting. Colorado Springs, that's where most of the people that work for the CIA and for the Space Force that carry out the torture live. And so I don't see, it just seems strange to me that this comes out of the hub of targeting out to the United States. This is the heart. This is where the root of the evil lies in Colorado in terms of targeting, because that's where the CIA has its headquarters under the airport in underground, and also where the Space Force operates. It's a Space Force.
So let's take a look who's behind this bill. It's a neurorightsfoundation.org. The motto of this organization, the slogan, is protecting human rights in the field of neurotechnology. But does it include targeted individuals? No. And here's an example. Neural Rights Foundation has been promoted as the protector of neural rights, and they passed a bill in Argentina, exactly the same bill that people have the rights to the neural data, and has the targeting in Argentina stopped? It did not. So it does not help targeted individuals whatsoever, because they are limiting the scope. This organization is limiting their scope to consumer products only to legal, to somebody who declares that we're gonna use this device and it's gonna collect or interact with your neural data. And this I know by talking to one of the founders. So the founders of the Neural Rights Foundation, this celebrated, much celebrated foundation, Professor Raphael Euster. He's a Columbia University professor, and he directs a neurotechnology center at that at the Columbia University. Jared Genser is their co-founder. He's a general counsel. He's known for his work in the international human rights. And this is a quote from him: "The issue is with technology at the consumer level. Are we target individuals consumers? Are we suffering because we bought an Apple Watch? No." And this is exactly what he told me in a conversation that I had with Mr. Genser. I asked him directly, would you consider including people to whom it's done criminally? And he said, no, this is outside of the scope of our organization. So it's outside the scope of the organization. It's outside the scope of the bills they sponsor. So it does not do anything for us. And the fact that they know about these violations, but they don't include it in the scope of their work and their bills, is hypocrisy.
It's a smoke screen. It's a magician's hand. Like with they're entertaining you here while they're here doing the trick on you with the other hand. Okay, that's what it is. Because this man is one of the proponents and promoters of the Brain Initiative, that Juste man. Okay, and he's a transhumanist, and they all know, Neuro Rights Foundation, him, everybody, all of them know that the data of targeted individuals is being harvested, and that targeted individuals are being tormented and tortured. But they look the other way because they need to continue getting profit from it. So, and that's my personal opinion. It's not targeted justice. My opinion is it's an act of hypocrisy to throw a bone to people thinking they have a false sense of safety and protection. And that's all it is. And it's no coincidence, like I said, it's no coincidence that this is in Colorado, which is the heart of the targeting program, because that's where the CIA has its hub under the airport, and where the US Space Force fires directed energy weapons at innocent Americans 24/7 and people around the world.
I agree. I agree with you, Anna. Once again, it's a personal opinion, but the fact of hypocrisy is too obvious. Yes, Neural Rights Foundation, Raphael Euster, Jared Genser, these are the people associated with it, but it also includes other public intellectuals. Anita Farahani wrote a book, The Battle for Your Brain. She describes the same technology, and she completely ignores the suffering of targeted individuals. She knows that targeted individual exists because the technology that she describes exists, and yet she would not fight for targeted individuals. We don't exist.
I want to add to that the dishonesty involved, and it is that innocent children are being tortured with microwave auditory effect, the Frey effect. and they all know it. And these are developing brains, and they know it's torture, and they know it's happening. Nobody tells me that they don't know it, because they know it. And because I am absolutely certain that targeted individuals from around the world have written to these people asking for help, and they just disregard and no, you're crazy, but they know better. And that is where the dishonesty lies. Len, I know of 100-year-old woman in a retirement community that gets tortured with holograms and directed energy weapons. Nobody can tell me that these people that are in such high positions with access to so much information and the data that is being harvested from our bodies and our brains, because let's face it, where is all that our data going? You see, some people are profiting from it. And so, it's, I think it's dishonest. And the whole bill, like I said, is just a magician's hand to keep people busy thinking they're doing something that it's meaningless and has no teeth.
I agree. Let's take a look at reaction and concerns about the bill. When I saw it, I had to tweet. This is what I tweeted. Does the bill also say how these violations will be detected and enforced? Otherwise, it's a toothless bill, more of a wishful thinking. What if the government is engaged in this kind of activity? Are you asking the government to police itself? Yes, it works every time, with a dose of sarcasm. This was your reaction, Anna, when I asked you about the bill. Under the supremacy clause, the states cannot prosecute the feds for their criminality, such as DoD harvesting our neural data. Would you like anything to add?
Yeah, and I forgot to add, harvesting our neural data without our notice or consent. Like we will discuss in the New Hampshire bill, at least the New Hampshire bill attempted, because they said under our 10th Amendment authority, we are going to regulate this. But Colorado doesn't even attempt that. One thing that Lighthouse has always said is we don't need additional statutes, because what these criminals do are physical aggressions. So all the states have, that kind of statute. The problem is that the states cannot prosecute the feds, and that's where the problem lies. That it has to come from an investigation from, let's say, Office of Inspector General, or from internal affairs of the DoD, signaling and pointing the people carrying out this torture and criminality against innocent civilians.
Yes, and this is what we're hoping to achieve in targeted justice v. Garland, when we actually get our day in court and we are allowed discovery. That's what we're going to ask for. So looking forward to that. Let's take a look at the New Hampshire bill. So this is the second bill that I became aware that was introduced in 2024, just this year. New Hampshire Bill 1700 FN. It's called the Clean Atmosphere Preservation Act. Somewhat unusual what they mean, but this is what the bill is about. Prohibiting the intentional release of polluting emissions, including cloud seeding, weather modification, excessive electromagnetic radio frequency, and microwave radiation, and making penalties for violation of such prohibition. Already better. There's
much better, and you see that there's an intent. You see that they have identified a problem, and they have an intention to solve it. And remember that New Hampshire is called the state of the free. So if it wasn't for the cold weather, I'd be inclined to move there.
What stood out to me is that they bunched it all together and put it under pollution. Okay, you can say that emission of radio frequency is you're polluting, but no, when you pollute, it spreads evenly. When we're targeted, that's intentional and it's a targeted delivery. So that's different from pollution.
Well, it's a start, and some of the provisions I had to discuss with Richard, because I don't, I'm not, I don't have an engineering background, so I didn't know what the Gauss and the measurements in there are. But when he read it, he said, it's good intentions also. He says the person that wrote this doesn't really understand the technology or how it's measured or anything. So they didn't put it. Yeah, there are possibilities of criminal prosecution, as we'll see, but they didn't frame it like that. They're framing it like an environmental problem.
Yes, even I noticed that there's some inconsistencies that I will point out to you. I would very much like to interview somebody who is behind the bill, because every bill has a sponsor. So what's the history of this bill? Who are people behind this bill? You're welcome to contact us. We would love to talk to you on our podcast. Let's go further. Here's the analysis of the bill. The bill establishes a regulatory process to prevent the intentional release of polluting emissions in New Hampshire atmosphere at ground level and provides penalties for violations. This bill requires report of such violations to be made by state officials and members of the public to the Department of Environmental Services, Air Resources Division of Compliance, and requires New Hampshire county sheriffs carry to enforce the provisions. Some part of it I like very much.
Yeah, and one of the things that at least I think is very open and shut that it prohibits, and it's good, is the chemtrails. Chemtrails are included in this bill, and those are like so obvious and so easy to prove. And just because the airplanes leave a record behind from where they take off and land, that in that little sense, yeah, that's very good. But they have a lot of regulations to develop as it pertains to its goal. They have to develop regulations, and I guess that's where we could come in handy to them and offer our technical assistance. I'm sure that Richard would very much offer to collaborate with them in the drafting of a regulation to make it happen, to put teeth into this statute.
This is a description of violative activity. The commissioner of the Department of Environment Services shall immediately issue a cease and desist order upon discovery of stratospheric aerosol injections, cloud seeding, weather modification, or other atmospheric polluting activity, including excessive electromagnetic radio frequency microwave radiation emission, where an agency, department, office, program, or member of the public produces evidence to the department or to New Hampshire county sheriffs that the activity may be harmful or involves release of a polluting emission. I like the word evidence. Now we are getting the granularity that we need. You go to the sheriff and say, I'm being attacked by a microwave and I have a meter that goes off the charts when I'm getting attacked. And they look at you and say, what does it have to do with me? And this bill says, yes, bring the evidence to the sheriff. I like it very much.
Yeah, but people have to learn also how to gather the evidence. There are kind of, the meters, and I don't know how they would do it. Just get the meter, get the video, and then that would be prima facie evidence that would trigger an investigation, right? But it's also subjected to the regulations that the the Department of Environmental Services adopts under this law. They need to define what kind of evidence. So because they need to train the sheriffs, these sheriffs, they're just used to having, breaking up a fight in a bar, and all of a sudden you're going to come to them and overwhelm them with all this scientific stuff that they are going to say, oh, it's fanciful or fantastical. They have it involves a lot of public expenditure in terms of training, public awareness, what kind of evidence they have to accept, what kind of investigation they have to carry out. But again, it's such a great start that it makes me want to move to to New Hampshire and work with them, because it's a really great, it's much better statute than the one in Colorado. And like you said, it hasn't received almost any coverage. Nobody knows about it.
Yes, that's what was so surprising to me, that I never heard about this bill until you sent me a copy. Let's look at the penalties. There's penalties in the bill. An entity or individual who engages in a hazardous atmospheric activity that we just listed has committed a felony and shall pay a fine of not less than 500,000 or be imprisoned for not less than 2 years, or both. Granularity. We're getting somewhere. We finally, we might be able to hold somebody responsible. Once
But
again,
again, I think that this is too ambiguous to be upheld as a crime, as a crime. It's too general, because I don't know if you have, we're going to mention later the parameters, but the parameters included in the law, you'll see that even you or I could be violating them. So even like a very advanced iPhone would generate the amount of atmospheric activity that could be considered under the statute as it is, that needs a little revision, could be considered a violation. So that's why I think that, again, it's a great step in the right direction. But we should all try to help New Hampshire to clarify it and make it a solid.
agreed. All right. So this part of the bill talks about public participation, that the public can report, and that photographs, electronic or hard copy documents with the respective location from which, and if the content is from other than a measuring device, the direction in which, so these are just parameters. So photographs, electronic or hard copy documents, videography, audiography, lab test, microscopy, spectrometry, metering, and other forms of evidence shall similarly be submitted in writing to the Department of Environmental Air Resources Division of Compliance, New Hampshire County Sheriffs, those are the sheriffs that stop the bar fights, or to any state office or any state public official. So you can report it. You can bring photographs. You can measuring devices. I know your concerns, but step in the right direction. And finally, the part of the bill where they talk about investigatory findings and responses. So the bill is trying to set specific parameters for excessive radio frequency electromagnetic emission. And some of them really raise my eyebrows, as well as Richard's, obviously, because some of the parameters are set in the units that describe relative signal. That means that you are not really talking about the strength of the signal, but how the signal is relative to another one. So I can produce, relative to a signal, I can produce anything, any data point. So it just, the fact that the units are not correct, that just makes me question, or maybe we don't understand. Maybe there's some electrical engineers that will explain that to us.
Well, but I have to say, I asked Richard, I showed them to Richard, and he told me these parameters, anybody, just standing under an electric transmission cable would be in violation of it. So they don't prove electromagnetic attacks or in any way pollution, okay, because their threshold is too low. It's so anybody can really violate them, or anything really. So it seems that the person that did that part does not have a background in math or science or engineering.
Yeah, well, there's room for improvement. I think we all can
Yeah.
learn
But the
on an
chemtrails, though, the chemtrails it's an open and shut thing. The chemtrails, because of their nature, you can perceive them, and I think that regarding the chemtrails, there's no doubt. Regarding the other matters, the good intention is there, but it needs a little polishing.
among other things, it talks about the 24-hour period and immediate order to cease operation and referral of suspected criminal activity to the judiciary for prosecution. So all the steps are outlined, but we don't see the full picture. And that's the end of the bill. Once again, we would like to know more. We would like to know the origin of this bill, who's behind it, what the purpose, how it's going to affect targeted individuals. But to me, so far, if I had to rate Colorado versus New Hampshire, it's Colorado 0, New Hampshire 1. What do you think?
Absolutely. And this last part gives room for targeted individuals to demand the de-weaponization of cell towers that have the Ericsson chip that produces the beamforming, microwave beamforming, and also the frequency multipliers that are like the shoebox frequency multipliers that are installed in towers close to hospitals that cause immediate death of people that are on respirators. So I think that targeted individuals in New Hampshire have a great opportunity to work with the Department of Environment and shutting down these weaponized towers.
Well, this is the end of our show. Would you like to say goodbye to our viewers, Anna?
Yes, I want to thank you for your comments and your support. And I I know what Len is going to say, but I just want to say that I will be here with him anytime he's here, and God gives me the health to be here, and the capacity to be here. I will be here because we are not going to leave not just the people in the United States, but the people outside of the United States. We're not going to leave anybody behind. We're going to shut this program down, and that's not a promise. It is a fact. Okay, we're going to do it. So with your support and the unity, we're going to do that.
Thank you, Anna. Today, I want to say goodbye to the phrase that I have been using to close every podcast. See you next Sunday, rain or shine, until today. The conditions of my targeting have made it impossible to release an episode every Sunday. But that doesn't mean I'm going to abandon you, podcast subscribers and viewers. Quite the opposite. Instead of making a commitment to a specific date of the week, I'm making a commitment to bringing you information based on facts. You see, the way you act depends on the way you think. And the way you think depends on the quality of the information you receive and how you relate to it. That's the commitment I'm making. So we will continue releasing Targeted Justice v. Garland podcast, but instead of Sunday, it will be released whenever. Whenever we have the important factual information to share, whenever we have a legal update or announcement, whenever we have an interesting person to have a conversation with. The podcast is a result of an effort of many people at Targeted Justice who volunteer their time and talents to make it happen. My gratitude goes out to them. Target Justice v. Garland, a podcast about an extraordinary lawsuit, will live on. This legal case will test our resolve as well as it will poke holes and reveal weaknesses of those who are gloating over the notion the targeting program is bulletproof, that nothing will break through the multiple walls they have built to conceal the truth. Only time will tell. As to me, I'm grateful for your support. It means more to me than you'll ever know. Knowing that I might be helping other people in my situation, even in a small way, warms my heart and recharges my battery. So until next time.